Hi, everyone. My name is Barry Heidowitz. I'm a director here at Extreme Labs, and today we have a special presentation on Windows Server 2025. It's a discussion with two subject matter experts, Demir and Andrew, who also work with Waypoint Ventures. We have contacts from Waypoint Ventures who are also on this call. Extreme Labs does offer courseware and labs from Waypoint, so if you have questions about that as that goes along, feel free to type them in the chat. We have both a chat section and a Q&A section, and I'll also put my contact information in if there are any questions about, this webinar, the products or services offered by Extreme Labs, or the courseware and labs that are available from Waypoint Ventures through Extreme Labs. I'm happy to help. Otherwise, I'll provide a little bit of background. So Demir Dizderovic is a longtime highly rated lecturer at many IT conferences in Eastern Europe. He has over 25 years of IT experience, mostly with Microsoft platforms and technologies. He specializes in identity management, M365, security, and server platforms. He's the author of numerous mock and community courses in the field of server and cloud platforms, as well as exams and professional articles in domestic and international magazines. He's been a MVP for 17 years, and since 2017, Demir has been awarded as Microsoft Regional Director. Currently, he's working as the CEO of Logosoft in Sarajevo, and it's one of the largest IT companies in Bosnia and Herzegovina. He occasionally writes a blog, and the articles are available at, well, I'll put it in the chat, izderovec.ba.ddemir blog. So I'll share that in the chat. And then our other presenter is Andy Warren, and Andy has been working in technology since 1984, joining the U.S. infrastructure company 3Com in 1988. He became a Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer and Microsoft Certified Trainer in 1996. In the early 2000s, he ran his own residential training business in Southwest Scotland. Lately, in addition to creating courseware and teaching, he's been writing exam certification books for Microsoft Press, including both identity and networking with Windows Server. Outside IT, Andy has a keen interest in military history with a particular focus on World War I and has written 5 books on the subject. Weekends, he volunteers at the Royal Navy Fleet Air Army Arm Museum, where he discusses early naval aviation with visitors. And Waypoint Ventures has roots going back to 2003. With that, Waypoint has more than 2 decades of experience delivering expert project management, technical consulting, and high-quality learning content for Microsoft and Microsoft-focused organizations. Waypoint is led by Meg Olson and Danica Richard, both present today. And Waypoint specializes in technical learning, content design and development, program and project management, and Microsoft technology consulting, including Microsoft 365, SharePoint, and Windows Server. And their flexible delivery model brings together seasoned subject matter experts, instructional designers, editors, and project leaders to form the right team for each engagement, ensuring quality, consistency, and results at scale. And with that, I'll hand it over to Andy and Demir to kick things off. So thank you.
So welcome, everybody. I think I'm the person who's going to start things by asking Demir some questions. So let's start with the big picture, Demir. When people hear Windows Server 2025, many still think of a classic server operating system running in the data center. Is that what it is? Or is it just the next version? Or what's the real story behind this release?
Yeah, hi everyone. First, I'm glad to be here and glad to share some insights about the Windows Server and related Microsoft technologies. And yes, you are right. Actually, the Windows Server has pretty, I would say, boring naming conventions since last 26 years. I would say since we started with the Windows 2000 and introduction with the Active Directory, it was kind of revolutionary. And then every couple of years we were getting just new version. This year, I mean, last year, Windows Server 2025 was released, but in a different product cycle, which is present for, I think, 4 to 5 years, which are not based on this traditional model, like a new version, and then we are going with service packs and all that stuff that we get used to with the other versions, but rather incrementally adding features and also shifting towards the cloud. And when you say Windows Server 2025 today, I would say we are not talking about on-premise anymore. And I would also say that that's probably brave to say, but I would still say that on-premise probably doesn't exist anymore, except when we are talking about physical equipment. But when we talk about the software, the platforms, it's very, very uncommon to have something that is totally on-premise, disconnected from the internet, disconnected from the cloud. And actually, Windows Server 2025 just, I would say, officially says that for the first time in the Windows Server family.
Okay, so is this shift to cloud an important shift? Is this something that's important for our customers to get around?
Well, yes, I would say that customers probably moved totally or partially to the cloud, despite what Microsoft says about that. And I would say that the Windows Server is rather accepting the reality than it's rather than moving something to the cloud. When we say today, when we say hybrid, when we generally talk about hybrid environments, we are talking about integrated platforms, no matter where they are physically stored. For the cloud, we usually even don't precisely know where they are. And when we say on-premise, we are talking about physical hardware, but for the platform, it really doesn't matter. So I would say hybrid is probably the most correct title for the IT infrastructure today of any kind.
So hybrid, are we talking then just about the combination of on-premise infrastructure of some degree and cloud infrastructure, which may be in something like Azure, or it may be in Microsoft 365 or other non-Microsoft platforms, or is that just one sort of collection of resources wherever they happen to be and users connecting to wherever the most appropriate location is for their workload to run?
Yeah. Well, what I would like to say when I'm teaching on the conferences, on the trainings, and when we talk about the hybrid in general and integration, I don't say that's necessarily integrated, the on-premise in some way, like you integrate, for example, the Active Directory and the Entra. It is more like using the cloud functionalities to make these on-premise stuff work better and with more functionality. They don't have necessarily be integrated. They can still work separately, but we can use some functionalities from the cloud, any platform. Of course, today we are talking about Microsoft platform, but it's not limited to the Microsoft platform. You can use any platform and functionalities from the cloud to enable and enhance your on-premise services. And a good example of that is like using the proxy servers from the cloud to publish some services from on-premise, or you can put the whole software-based firewall in the cloud to protect your on-premise environment, and that firewall can be, for example, I don't know, Juniper or something like that. Then you can have a Microsoft infrastructure that don't need to be integrated, on some software level. But only on a network level, and that's still be hybrid environment.
Well, okay, so that's quite interesting. But as an IT pro, maybe working in a data center somewhere or other, why would that matter to me? Why would that matter to the rest of the IT team?
Well, I'd say probably at the first place because Microsoft will probably stop developing on-premise products quite soon. And when you look at the Windows Server and technologies integrated in Windows Server, we haven't seen anything big, new. I think for the last maybe probably 10 years. It's mostly some small incremental updates on the existing technologies. So and it's not just about Microsoft. That most of the other vendors in the other ecosystems are also thinking in that way. So let's move all that to the cloud so we can easily manage that and don't bother customers with the installation and the maintenance and the backups and everything. So let's just place the features to the customers to use that for their core business, and the cloud providers will take the care of the rest. Of course, some conservative organizations or companies would probably stick with that classical approach with the on-premise infrastructure for some time. But I would say that most of the companies, especially the new companies that are startups and companies that are being founded in the last couple of years and in the for next couple of years, they will probably think cloud first and then thinking about the on-premise infrastructure. That's what I've seen in the practice actually, and I can't remember actually when was the last time I saw a new company that was thinking about building a server infrastructure on premise. Most of them were just going directly to the cloud and just buying some, laptops or tablets, and that was it.
Yeah, I mean, that's been my experience. Over the last few years, I've always posited the idea that historically larger organizations, enterprises, may be moved in the direction of platform as a service, infrastructure as a service type providers, and smaller businesses tended to go down the software as a service route. And certainly that's true for me as a consultant. I've got a Microsoft 365 subscription. Sure, I have access to Azure as well, but that's not something I use on a day-to-day basis. It doesn't really fit with anything that I particularly need. So what sort of numbers do you feel there are in terms of people that are 100% cloud native and 100% on-prem? I mean, what's the kind of split do you feel? Some organizations, or every organization, has some exposure to the cloud, but is it tending to be large enterprises that have that higher use of cloud platforms?
Yeah, well, look, that depends on the organization size, and I would say that the bigger the organization, the more hardware they have on premise and more services on premise. But everyone in general is exposed to the cloud, at least for the customers that I work with, which are from various industries, banking and healthcare and industry, the automobile industry also. They all use some cloud services to some extent, and most of them start with the M365, which is especially popular here in the Eastern Europe. I would say that the footprint of the M365 is like 95% plus. Most of the companies use that. Some of them are also using Azure services, but I really can't remember any company for the last 10 years that I've seen that there is no exposure with to the cloud at all. Probably, I don't know, military or police, but I don't work with them, so I don't know.
It is interesting, isn't it? I did some training recently for somebody for an Azure course actually, and they were a national airline here in Europe, and they're working with a mix of on-prem Active Directory and services, and they have an interest in Azure, although their specific interest is Azure Virtual Desktop, and of course Microsoft 365 and Intune to manage devices. So they've got a real mix, and they're quite a large enterprise. So maybe moving on from that, then it's maybe worth thinking about Windows Server 2025. We've heard that it has some sort of hybrid capabilities. What makes Windows Server 2025 more hybrid orientated than previous versions, therefore more worth consideration at this point?
Well, it's on the first sight, when you install the Windows Server 2025, the first thing you see when you sign into the Windows Server is to deploy the Azure Arc agent, which is actually before it was the server manager and or a Windows Admin Center or things like that. Now, actually, the first thing is to install the Azure Arc client and manage that server from the cloud by using capabilities of the Azure infrastructure to manage, update, and maintain the server. Everything actually that we were doing manually or by using some on-premise services before. So I would say that's probably the most visible shift that you cannot miss. But also there are a bit of a lot of other functionalities that are have a touch of the cloud on almost every place. So even with the Active Directory, which is traditional on-premise service for the last 26 years, even that is now strongly suggested to synchronize with the Entra, because in the Entra you have much more capabilities to manage identities than you have in the local Active Directory. And especially when you're talking about security, Active Directory on premise is not capable to provide any of the modern authentication mechanisms. But like if you consider that as one of the main Windows Server services, it is in 2026 year, which we are today. It's pretty unusual to say, okay, we do have the identity service on premise, but we cannot implement multi-factor authentication on it. And actually, that is true for the Active Directory. You cannot implement multi-factor authentication in any way in the Active Directory unless you buy some third-party software. Microsoft was developing Forefront Identity Manager maybe a decade ago, but then they discontinued that product. And today, with that product, you were able to configure some way of the MFA, but today you're not able to do that. And that, on the other hand, is the default on all our cloud services. And when you think about identity today, especially if you are in the IT field, you cannot even imagine that you're using any account without having some kind of multi-factor authentication, and even more than that, having passwordless authentication without passwords at all. And that's probably one of the best way to describe that difference between these on-premise services and how far behind they are when we compare them with the cloud services. And that's the key reason, I would say, that's the key reason for the Microsoft and for the people to care about these services, and why the Microsoft is actually pushing these services to the clients and to the server machines to just actually to catch up with all these functionalities that are present in the cloud and you cannot implement on premise.
Okay, so you briefly mentioned Azure Arc, which I always find to be quite an interesting capability with Azure. Every time I teach one of the administration courses, we always look at that feature and the simplicity with which you can update, for example, your Windows servers that are on-prem simply by onboarding them to Arc, and suddenly they're visible in the Azure portal. And can you tell me a bit more about why Azure Arc is important? Perhaps some sort of, consider it some sort of bridge. What's its role with Windows Server 2025?
Well, the role of that is, I would say, some kind of transitional approach from Microsoft for the people to get used to management from the web, using web console, and from using the cloud services in general. Because I would say, and that's my personal opinion, of course, you can agree or not, that the attempt with the Windows Admin Center was not successful. And the Windows Admin Center was a kind of, I would say, hybrid management mechanism that included both on-premise tools and some cloud tools. But I don't see many people use that actually as the main management mechanism. And the Azure Arc is how Microsoft sees the management of the both cloud and the on-premise infrastructure, especially servers, and not just Windows servers, but also other servers. And that's the way actually to get used to that kind of management. And of course, for the users and companies that have one or two servers, we should be honest, it doesn't make much sense to use the Azure Arc to onboard them and manage them. You can probably do it easier by doing it by yourself, but you wouldn't have a tool very soon. So that's, I would say, the only path that we have currently, if we want to have the all the up-to-date technologies for the server management, is go to the Azure Arc, because no other software, at least from the Microsoft ecosystem, is being developed to do that. Because, for example, for the updating, which is probably the most common thing, the Windows Server update services is discontinued, and it'll probably go to the end of life very soon. And we've been using that for more than 20 years, like the main tool for updating clients, and it's not there anymore. It's probably in a year or two it won't be supported anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, I mean, certainly easy once you've got something onboarded to Arc, which in itself is not a complicated thing to do. As you say, you click an icon and it onboards the server for you, essentially. You haven't even got to download a script or anything. And once it's there, it's surprising where your servers suddenly appear. You see them popping up in Update Manager, and then they're in Monitor, and well, there's a little bit more onboarding to be done there, but essentially it's a very straightforward process. And I think you're right. Windows Admin Center always struck me as being a tool that you use to primarily manage things on-prem, but also you can use them to manage Windows servers that are running in the cloud. But Azure Arc isn't just about that. It's much more, which is, I guess, why it makes it so compelling. I had another question related to this, but to do with hot patching. Why is hot patching such an important message in this release?
Well, the answer is very simple, actually. It provides you with the updates without restarting machines. And that's probably something that that's the one of the biggest pains of every Windows Server administrator, and even with the Windows desktop, usually it comes in a time when you don't need it, and then you postpone it, and then eventually it restarts itself. But it's really surprising that most of the updates today still require a restart of the machine, and that can be really disturbing, especially when it comes to business environments. On the other hand, similar as with the examples that I gave before, there is no restarts in the cloud environment, and that's one of the things that simply doesn't exist there.
Yeah,
but you can configure whatever you want in the Azure platform or the M365 platform. You will never see a prompt, you need to restart this service or this server. And what Microsoft is actually trying to do with the hot patching, with the newer Windows platform, of course, is actually to enable that service and that capability for the machines that are running in cloud or being managed by the Azure Arc. I wouldn't say that that's the 100%, and that you can be sure that you will never have to restart your Windows Server. You probably will, but definitely it will be much smaller amount of the restarts that you would need to do than you have to when you have a real on-premise environment. I'm running a Windows Server 2025 at my test machine here, actually at my home, just for the testing, and I'm really surprised that even on the small updates that the restart is still required, and that's really annoying.
Yeah.
So I would say hot patching is very welcome.
Thank you. Right. So changing direction now, I think we want to focus a little bit on security. We only have so much time. So it's always important, security. It's something we focus on. You mentioned multi-factor authentication, of course, and as you say, it's difficult to believe that you could sign into anything that doesn't require at least 2 factors to prove who you are. What's the most important security improvements in Windows Server 2025?
Well, there are mostly small incremental improvements. I wouldn't say that there is anything major and anything that the end user can actually see. I would say you should trust Microsoft on their words that they actually improved something, because it's really, you can see some new functionalities, like new security features or things like that. There are some small updates on the security of the Active Directory, on the schema, on the LDAP signing, the ticket granting tickets. TLS is now default and upgraded to the version 1.3. SMB is also being more secure than it was before. The old versions of the SMB 1.0 is totally disabled. But as I said, nothing is actually visible there, and you can't say that anything of these functionalities are breakthrough or something that will totally change the security or provide some much higher level of security for the organization. On the other hand, if you integrate with a cloud and on the first place with the Entra ID, because we are talking about the Active Directory currently, then there you can see much bigger improvements. And one of the things that I've been playing in last couple of weeks is actually connected to the Entra, to the accounts where you use your government issued ID to verify your identity to Entra. That's a real actually improvement. And when you want to reset the account, you actually present your government issued ID to verify your identity, and you log on to Entra. And that is being done by Microsoft integration with one of the global services that are using the verified ID as an object to verify someone's identity. But I just told you that as an example of how far that can go when it comes to security and the extensibility, and also the making user lives easier, and also the system admin's life easier. On this traditional Active Directory, we are still there where we were. I would say maybe 10 years ago. Nothing major happened there. That was just small updates. And Microsoft even says that they don't have intention to release any new big version of the Active Directory.
Well, so since you're talking about Active Directory, is Active Directory still going to be important to organizations for those that are moving to the cloud? Will that suggest that Active Directory will, based on what you've just said, perhaps that is suggesting that Active Directory will cease to exist and eventually fade away into the background completely, or is that not true?
Well, I would say that it'll definitely become less and less important. It will not cease to exist, at least not in some near future. But today, almost every Active Directory, I would say almost every, in a what we say average company, is integrated with Entra. And what I see in a real life is that even though the source of the truth is still the Active Directory, like users' accounts are being edited there and synchronized to the Entra ID, but in reality, much more functionalities for these accounts are being used from the cloud than on premise. Because when you imagine the company which is very realistic, which has the local Active Directory and some maybe file servers, and all other things are in a cloud, like in the M365. And when you integrate the local AD with the Entra in the M365, what actually you are authenticating to on premise? Maybe just the file services or file shares. When you move that to the SharePoint or OneDrive, there is nothing actually there for the Active Directory to authenticate you. So it is already becoming less and less important as the other services are moving to the cloud, because we always need to have in mind that the Active Directory is not a service for itself. It serves for the other services. It serves to issue an authentication ticket when you want to access another resource in your network, and of course to identify you as a user. But if the resources and applications are moving to the cloud, then what would you do with the Active Directory? So slowly but surely, it will become less and less important. And for example, I very rarely see that anybody is actually like synchronizing, the Entra to the Active Directory back. That's although it is possible, but almost nobody does that.
Yeah. I guess also those organizations that have a requirement for Active Directory, say to support an application that requires Active Directory, what you might call a directory aware, they do have the
older
option.
application, we will definitely be seeing that still.
Yeah, and of course they do have the option for entry domain services, which will provide a serverless equivalent if that's something that they particularly need. So again, that journey away from the on-prem doesn't necessarily mean that it's journey finally away from Active Directory. There's still a number of ways of supporting that. Okay, how are we doing for time? Are we taking questions for everybody at the end, or do you want me to give an opportunity now for any questions before we move on to the second section? Thoughts on that, Barry?
It's however you want to do it. So we can, I mean, it's your comfort level and your available timing. So
okay,
if anybody has
anything specific to the first things we talked about right now before they forget, because that's me. I think, oh, I've got a question. I can't remember what it is now though. So anybody's got something, please ask.
Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, do please type them into the chat or the Q&A section.
Otherwise, we'll just move on to and give some more opportunities at the end.
Okay.
Okay. That's
otherwise,
fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So file services. This is one of those interesting things. And in fact, I think Damir, you just mentioned OneDrive and SharePoint in your earlier response. So that's interesting. It puts me in mind of it's a discussion I have with my students from time to time, which is you're used to saving stuff to a file server in your on-prem network. A user might recognize that as drive F and doesn't really mean very much more to them than that. So maybe if they belong to a particular department, that's their drive F. If they belong to a project, that's their drive G. So file services are really quite important, but as we move to the cloud, we're talking about things like OneDrive and SharePoint, and the way in which you share content is often through Teams. For instance, go to the Files tab and you make a file available to somebody simply by sharing a link to it, specifying the level of access. And that's great for sort of version management and for recovery without really needing to think about it. But are file services, other than with the cloud, still important? File services in the on-prem environment?
Yeah,
any changes there?
Actually, it's similar as that example that I provided for the Active Directory at Entra. The approach to the file services on premise and the approach to the file services and sharing services in the cloud is totally different. And a very simple example is the following: in the Windows Server file service and file server, you need to be admin to share something. There is no possibility for the user to share a file with another user in the same company. You cannot do that. You can you can send it to with the email or put in some location where the other user can access, but you don't have the option to share. While when you have the files on the SharePoint or on OneDrive or a Google Drive or whatever service you can imagine, the sharing is default. And that's actually available to anybody. So that's the whole different approach. And as a transition, because of course probably the most common on-premise service besides the Active Directory is probably the file server. That's probably the second most common service, is based on the SMB, and that's the old-fashioned protocol. And what Microsoft provided in the Windows Server 2025 as I would say, transitional technology is something called SMB over Quick UDP Internet Connection, or SMB over QUIC. And you will see that abbreviation very, very, very often. By doing this, they actually say, okay, we will provide you with a way to access your on-premise files even when you are in cloud and even when you are on, let's say, untrusted networks. And that's probably besides disabling the SMB 1.0, this functionality is probably one of the biggest functional improvements in the Windows Server 2025, having in mind how often people use the file servers. But still, that you can use that, but if you have cloud services, you cannot just publish your file server on the internet. That's not possible. But if you integrate that with a, and probably not very wise to do either. But if you integrate in some way with the cloud, with Azure, with the Entra ID, you can use this new functionality to access your on-premise environment until you migrate to some cloud service. But as I said, that approach to the file sharing, which is kind of the primary sense of the file services, it's totally different, and it's pretty hard actually for the end user to use so different approaches when sharing files online and sharing files on premise. And what I see also in the real life is that even the users that are still using or working in organization with file servers, when they want to share that something that they're working on, they actually upload that usually to some private cloud service and then share from there, which is very, very wrong, extremely wrong approach. But if the IT doesn't provide them with a decent solution, user will find a way, but that way most likely will not be the most secure way.
No, users always find a way. That's absolutely true.
Yes.
Okay, so slightly different direction now. I've been doing some work on this actually today, as it turns out. Virtualization, that's obviously fairly critical to the cloud environment. Without virtualization, there would be no cloud. So fairly critical development, really. Some audiences might want to know whether Hyper-V still matters in the era of the cloud. Since you can spin up a VM running in Azure or some other cloud provider, where does Hyper-V sit in this context?
Well, in Windows Server 2025, it's still, I would say, almost unchanged when we compare to the previous versions. Microsoft provided some, bigger, higher number of virtual machines that you can run and a higher amount of memory that you can allocate, which are, the amounts that are insane, I would say. That so, and very few people will actually need to allocate 240 terabits of RAM memory to the virtual machine. But anyway, maybe some small cloud providers will. Hyper-V is still there. I still see people using that, and probably that service will survive for some time, especially in the companies where that invested in some virtualization hardware recently, in the last couple of years, because running virtual machines in a cloud is not, I would say, it can be pretty expensive. It's not cheap, and especially if you need to allocate a lot of resources to the virtual machine, and it's not easy to manage actually. The cost, if you don't understand the Azure cost management, it can be pretty tricky to manage the cost of the all services that you run there. So if company invested in a virtualization infrastructure and the hardware for on-premise and built the Hyper-V infrastructure there, they will probably wait for some more years before moving that to Azure. Because unlike the M365, which is productivity suite and has very predictable cost, exactly how much money you will pay each month for your license. Running virtual machine in Azure can be quite unpredictable.
Yeah, I mean, it's slightly different direction, but that's that conversation between Azure Virtual Desktop and Windows 365. One is entirely predictable, and the other is based on what you use.
Of course, yes. And for the end user, Azure Virtual Desktop and Windows 365, they look the same. But they're quite different, and that's a very good example that you provided. So I would say Hyper-V is still there. Microsoft probably will not be improving it much in the coming years and the coming iterations of the Windows Server, but we will be there together with the VMware, of course, platform and the other platform.
Well, I've just got one last question, which is to do with GPU partitioning and AI readiness. AI is everywhere at the moment. It's all that we hear about. And in fact, I was noting in the paper today that Japanese airlines are testing out humanoid robots to do luggage handling it, and so that's interesting. But slightly more focused on our level of IT, is there something that Windows Server has that's related to either of those aspects?
Well, yeah, that's as you mentioned, that GPU partitioning is one of the new features, I would say, in the Hyper-V of the Windows Server. I wouldn't say that the many people will use it actually, because that feature enables you to split, functionality of the single GPU adapter between multiple virtual machines, so they can all use some potential workloads and run the workloads like for AI or something like that. But on the other hand, it is pretty rare that you actually put some powerful GPU in the virtualization server. So
Yes.
they're mostly some kind of very average or under average GPUs, and so that can be useful, but for the very specific cases. And where I see that as a real life scenario, if you are running some AI models within virtual machines, inside the virtual machines, and these virtual machines are Hyper-V, and then you need some GPU resources for that, and then you can use this GPU partitioning. But other than that, I can't really come up with any other scenario, because you probably won't be doing a video editing in a virtual machine, so that you need the graphical adapter in the server.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you. I've just got one more question, which is related to the courseware, really, rather than the product itself. How do Waypoint courses address the new approach to Windows Server 2025?
Yeah, we can actually both talk about that, because you are also writing that courseware, not just myself. But yeah, so it'll be great to hear your perspective too. But what we actually do, or when writing courseware, is to apply this approach from this conversation. It's not just about what's new. That's something that you can easily find online, and probably 3 clicks away from any what's new question in any product on the world. So with each new version of the courseware at Waypoint, we try to provide that bigger picture, to actually not just introduce Windows Server as, for example, Windows Server 2025 as, this is new server, you have GPU partitioning, you have a new features on the SMB or something like that, and just click through the lab to see how it works. It's rather an approach to provide a context, why that product is important. Why would you upgrade in the context of your whole organization and your whole environment? And in this hybrid world where we live today, I think that's the only correct and reasonable approach for the courseware, because you need to be different from just looking at the YouTube video about any product. And when I'm writing the courseware, I actually start with thinking, okay, what can I say there? That people cannot find on the YouTube video on the 5-minute YouTube video, and start from there. And that's something that's the additional value that we want to provide in the courseware that made on Waypoint. Do you agree?
I do, and I think whenever I've been putting things together for courses, I tend to start with the whole practical side of things. What are the skills that people need to apply in their day-to-day job? I think it's often called a job task analysis, but that's essentially what it is. What do I need to do on a day-to-day basis? What's the most important thing to me? And we try to align the courses with those job roles as far as that's possible.
Yes.
And there is often a degree of overlap. People have different skill sets that apply to slightly different technologies, and different technologies that apply to different job roles. So we have them aligned along those sorts of lines, understanding about storage and compute, or looking at networking, because often networking is something that takes place first, and then the storage is attached to the network, and then the server operating system comes on and brings all that together. And then the evolution of cloud and adding cloud, so Microsoft 365 messaging, and how that impinges on server or on-prem servers that are running Exchange on the Windows platform. All those skills are unnecessary depending on what your role is. So for me, it's always been, what are the hands-on tasks that we need to perform, and then we put the content around that to make it make sense.
Yeah.
So I guess then I'm going to hand over. First of all, thank you, Damir. But I'm going to hand over to Barry to see if there are any questions from anybody who's attended the session. Now would be a good time.
Yeah, I'm still not seeing any questions, but yeah, if anybody has any questions, do please type them in either on the chat or Q&A section, and we'll present it so we can get them addressed. But just give people a moment.
Yeah, people can also contact us via email and the waypoint. I'm sure that
right.
there are
So,
contact details. So if they they want to ask anything when it comes to Windows Server or any other product that we are making courseware on, please feel free to visit Waypoint site or just write to the hello@waypoint.ws, and we'll be happy to answer if we know, of course, but we'll do our best.
Yeah. So we've got a question from Will here. Can Windows Server 2025 be installed on a physical computer? Well, yes, it can.
Yes, on a physical and on a virtual, of course. And the hardware requirements are really unchanged, I think, for the last 3 versions. So you can barely run it on anything, I would say.
It is a good question, because I seldom think of actual computers anymore, because I guess also in the training world, we have to design things around the notion that they have to be accessible remotely. So the only real way of doing that is via the cloud. So I almost never install something on a physical computer anymore. So that's a good question.
That's becoming pretty rare. And I still have one physical machine here, but it's becoming more and more rare to do that. But I still have that pleasure to install, actually install something on a hardware.
Yeah.
You need to do that from time to time.
The old days of swapping discs.
Yes.
Yeah. Everyone can go now, and Damir and I will just reminisce about the old days.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, well, I guess I'll hand back to Barry to handle the session.
Sure. So we have information on this slide about role alignment and the various courses. If there's any recommendations you have as far as, well, from any of these titles, I mean, maybe you could clarify a bit about your recommendations and maybe some of these courses provide additional coverage or detail on Server 2025.
Well, I don't know, actually. What are we with 2025 on these? How updated are they?
Well, all of these courses will be updated, and currently, Meg, do you want to take this?
20742 has been updated, and Windows Server Admin has been updated. 20740 will release tomorrow or in the next couple of days. And 20741, my best guess would be end of May at this point. How'd I do? Sound right? Sound about right?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Otherwise, thank you for that information.
Yeah, thanks, Barry. Thanks for asking. Yeah, we
no problem.
Have included that in the slide. Yeah.
Any other questions from any attendees?
Yeah, I see a question. Are there any compatibility concerns with legacy applications? As far as I know, nothing new. except this with the SMB. So and you using the NTLM as a default authentication protocol. So if you have an application that's that is using the SMB 1.0, or it's using the NTLM as the main authentication mechanism, that might raise some compatibility concerns. But other than that, if it's working on a Windows 2022, that it'll probably work on a 2025.
Okay. Good to know. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Well, if anybody thinks of anything, I shared my contact information, and here again is the information both for Waypoint. So there's hello@waypoint.ws, where people can ask Waypoint, excuse me, the team at Waypoint any questions directly, or you can also reach me directly. My information is right there, including number to come directly through on my office line. And then also we can put, I'll share a link in the chat for the Waypoint titles that people can access. So this, if you're interested, this information is here. Actually, maybe the better way to, yeah. So there's a link in the chat for the all the Waypoint content that's available through Extreme Labs. Otherwise, I guess we'll give people one more chance to ask any questions. And if not, yeah, they can always, if they think of something later on, follow up via the contact information on the screen. And yeah, I'll just wait one more moment.
Well, while you're waiting, Barry, I'm just going to say a huge thank you to Damir and Andy for a fabulous discussion. And Barry and Domia and the Extreme Labs team, thank you for the opportunity to collaborate and for your sharing your expertise and for the great partnership behind today's webinar and behind our relationship. So thank you so much to Extreme Labs as well.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. I don't think there are additional questions, but thank you, everyone, for your time. Thank you for the Waypoint team. Thank you, Andy and Damir. Also, Meg and Danica, thank you for sitting in on this. And otherwise, thanks, everyone.